I'm glad to be here, and part of why I'm here is actually because over the years, I built confidence through resilience. Because when I was young, I wasn't that outgoing. I was often like caught in my own dreams and my own fantasies, and I was not really shy, but I was quiet and vulnerable, and I'm still all those things. So what has changed? I have practiced social practice through role-playing games to be someone I'm not. And being someone I'm not helped me build a new identity through resilience. So I started playing role-playing games when I was about 13 years old, and I started playing with my friends. And in the beginning, I was quite timid. I was not really sure how it goes, and the good thing is all my friends didn't know either, so we tried out some things. And it didn't take long, and it was me who started running those games. It was me who developed ideas, created worlds, created stories, and shared them in our group. And I learned through that. My friends learned through it. Our characters learned through this, and we grew, building resilience by using empathy with our characters and learning from their failures. And that's the topic of my talk, building resilience through role-playing games, through being someone you're not. Now, most people think about resilience as just simply bouncing back. I think that's not enough. Simply bouncing back is a passive move. It doesn't really fit into resilience, because I think resilience is a reflective move, something where we have to be active. And the difference between this active resilience and just bouncing back is what often is called failing well. And we have heard that term today already a few times. Now, to fail well, we need two things. First of all, we need to own our failures. We need to acknowledge our failures. And then we need to reflect on those failures. We need to figure out which part of this failure is from the outside, where I have no control over. Which part of this failure is actually in my control. And then I need to analyze how I can change this part. To visualize that, we can just take a quick look at a baby walking or trying to walk. This is basically bouncing back. The baby falls, gravity takes over, the baby gets up, walks again. Now, this is admirable, but it's not really reflective. The baby doesn't analyze, oh, at which part was gravity stronger than I was. So to visualize failing well, or the active part, I want to talk about me failing, because I know failure. I have failed. My first time I received a failing grade was in grade 4. And this was a spelling test. And throughout the year, there were many, many spelling tests and dictations. I failed most of them, but I worked hard on it. I worked actively on getting better. And it took me all the way till graduation, 8 years, until a teacher finally said, yeah, your spelling has improved. And now I teach a language. Now, we know what resilience is. Let's talk about RPGs, role-playing games. And role-playing games have many different names. Some people call them tabletop role-playing games, TTRPG, or pen and paper games. Some people call them shared narratives or cooperative storytellings. And there are many, many different games out there. There are very heavily created stories out there with a big backstory. And there are systems out there that are very free. And I played a great variety of different games, and recently I created my own game, a very free game focusing very strong on the narrative part. But what all of those games have in common is they usually center on a character, a hero, or a group of heroes. And they try to save the day, just like in a good story. And just like in a good story, it's not going to be linear. So in RPGs, we have the opportunity to be someone we're not. We get the opportunity to play a hero who tries to fight the bad guy, and on its way there, fails and gets back up again. Being someone you're not, being a character in a role-playing game, most players, and they do it instinctively, most players choose a character that is somehow similar to their own personality, and there's usually one big difference. Usually we choose a character that is a little bit better than we are, because usually we look for a character that we aspire to be. So it's not just I'm playing someone I'm not. I'm actually playing someone I'm not yet. And this is basically growth mindset built into role-playing games, because in role-playing games, the objective is to get better. Your character gets better. They develop skills, they gain abilities, they level up. And this growing part, this is what's interesting here. Okay? Safe space. Role-playing games are usually played among friends, sitting around a table. At least that's how I started. I'm aware technology caught up, and people are now sitting at computers and playing with people all around the world. What this all has in common is we are in a situation where we play a character. And even if we don't know this character is similar to us, we still want to feel safe in this situation. And most role-playing games provide a safe space. In their mechanics, they don't allow your character or the other person's character to do whatever they want. But playing with strangers, we might want to look also at some safety tools. And there are quite a few out there, and in recent years, those safety tools have gotten more. And I just want to showcase a few of them, because I think this is really important. There's, for example, the session zero. Session zero just means the players get together and they talk about what they want from the game, what themes and topics they want to appear in the game. And they also talk about which topics they don't want to talk about, they don't want in their game to show up. Then we could talk about consent forms, which basically takes this session zero a step further. You have a tick list where you say, okay, this topic is okay, this topic I don't want. And it's basically like making a contract with your fellow players and figuring out the lines you don't want to have crossed. And sometimes we don't know about a topic that might come up in a game. Then we could use something like the X card. It's basically a card that you play in the game, and it signals to the other players, I don't want to talk about this topic. And everyone winds back, just the scene, and the story goes a different way, no questions asked. And you always have the opportunity in your game to just pause. There's not much structure to just pausing, but you always have the opportunity. Now, all those safety tools, what they are doing is building trust. And that's really important, because if I want to get something out of role-playing just besides fun, I need to trust this environment that I'm in. I need to trust that the choices I make for my character in the game are valued by the other players. I need to trust to be emotionally invested with the situation. Because if I'm not emotionally invested in the situation, I won't do a reflection. I won't develop that resilience. I won't be able to fail well, because I always will be distant from the situation. Now that we have that out of the way, let's do a little bit role-playing. Who did some role-playing before? I'm glad I see lots of hands. Partially because of me, because I taught you guys last year and we did that in class. So think about a character that you would like to be. Just picture some character in your mind, someone you aspire to be. Now, think about what are the flaws of this character? What are the strengths of this character? How does your character look like? Do they have a favorite food? Do they have a backstory? Just take a moment and try to picture a character. You have someone in mind? I can't really see you, so I need some confirmation. Do you have someone in mind? Okay. Now the next step is, and this is more important than it looks like, we name our character. Yes. So naming something gives us this connection between something. If I just have a thingy, I won't do anything. If I know the name of that thingy, I have a connection to it. So if I have a name to my character, I have a connection to my character. I'm emotionally invested. So take a second, think about a good name for your character. Maybe something that highlights the strength of your character. Okay, now all together on the count of 3, just shout the name out. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Great. I said I started playing when I was 13, so I want to share a little bit my first character that I ever created. My first character that I created was an inexperienced witch riding on a broomstick with a raven as a familiar. And I named her after a giant spider in the Silmarillion, Tolkien's book, Ungoliath. So those of you who actually read the Silmarillion know that I made a spelling mistake there. I realized that later on, I just ignored it, I just went with it. My character was called Ungoliath. Now, with our character in mind, I want you to picture some sort of failure that your character might encounter. Now, you could just go into the example that I took with the spelling test. Now, it's a little bit silly to have a witch sitting a spelling test in school, so try to think of maybe something more heroic. Like you're a band of heroes, right? There's that bad guy, the villain, and you run in there, flying banners, and you fail. Now, how would your character feel about this failure? Remember, you thought about some characteristic, you thought about some flaws. Maybe your character would be completely outraged. Maybe your character wouldn't be that much phased, but think about why does your character react in this way? Think about what would your character do in this situation, facing this failure. And now think about what could your character do better next time. Congratulations! If you haven't played a role-playing game before, you just did. That's basically it. It happens in your mind, you think about a situation, you think about how it played out. And if you don't have the answer to the questions I just asked, that's perfectly fine. Because that's what actually happens when you play role-playing games. You run into an encounter, and at some point, you don't know what's going to happen next. And this is where usually you have a cut in your game. The session ends. Often, this is a cut, a natural cut in the story, and you just meet the next time. Now, those cuts, they don't happen in real life. Well, the game doesn't continue without us, but real life just goes on. Our game, we are in control to pause the game. Real life doesn't have a pause button, okay? And this is where the resilience part comes into it. If I have time to pause the game, if I say my character just encountered a major failure, and I don't know what to do, and I say, let's pick up next week when we meet again. I have time to think about that. I have the luxury of time. I have time to think and to reflect. I have time to fail well because I get this reflection time. And if I use this time wisely, I can change the story. If I don't use this time and just do what I did before, I failed, failing well. Now with this time, going back into the story, changing the story, we can try out things. We have a connection to our character, but we are not the character. We might encounter similar obstacles in-game that we face in real life, but the game is not our real life. We are in a safe space, not just inside the game, but we are sitting behind the fourth wall. We have a distance between us. This makes it so safe. We get to try out things that we would never do in real life through our characters. And if we fail as our characters, we don't have any real life consequences from it. And that's what I like so much about role-playing games. I can build resilience through failing well in a game. Because role-playing games, they offer the opportunity to fail without consequences. It offers a safe space where I can be someone I am not yet. It offers a safe space where I could face obstacles and challenges I would never face in real life, or maybe not yet. And it gives us the opportunity to pause and reflect on the failures that happened in-game. And with that, with coming back to that, I want to share my final words with you because I think this is a really good chance for us. So I want you to be creative. Create worlds. Use your imagination. Share your worlds. Create stories. Share your stories. Use narrative mechanisms. Use narrative games like RPGs to try out a character you're not, someone you aspire to, someone you want to be. Walk in your character's shoes, face obstacles, and fail well. Thank you.